He goes on to say in this first quote, and I'm going to quote more from him as we go on, but his first quote ends by saying, "This exegetical dispute is difficult as all natural languages allow persons to be described in mode terms," right? He gives an example from the former president, Hillary Clinton. He says, Hillary is Bill's strength. Hillary is, of course, his wife, Hillary Clinton. So we have Hillary is Bill's strength. This is kind of mode terms or mode terminology. That's kind of a stylistic way of talking about the relationship between Bill Clinton and his wife, Hillary. Hillary is Bill's strength. In what way? Well, is she like an emanation from him, the way the Spirit of God emanates from God? Well, not necessarily. I mean, they're two separate beings. So we have to allow for the language here to be representative of the relationship between these two separate individuals. But with God, it's a little more complex. He goes on to say, and modes, right? Let me just read the whole quote. The exegetical dispute is difficult as all natural language allows persons to be described in mode terms and modes to be described in language which literally applies only to persons, right? Meaning we often talk about God as if God could make choices the way humans make choices and have limitations applied to himself when we're talking about the modes that God could exist in. He gives this little example here at the end. It's kind of humorous. He says, God's wisdom told him not to create beer-sap trees. Okay. We know that the sap coming from trees is not the composition of tree sap is not beer. But what if God, he could have created beer sap, right? If he did, wow, the whole world would be drunk all the time, right? Because you could just go outside and tap a tree and get drunk off of that. But God in his wisdom, or God's wisdom, told him not to create beer sap trees. Now, what are we saying? That his wisdom spoke to him? Who is this wisdom? Is it just a mode of God? Is it a separate being of God? Is it a power from God that's talking to him, telling him not to create? So we're talking about just the way language strikes us. And again, in all fairness, what Dr. Dougie is simply reminding us of is the fact that the Bible is written in the language of men. God chose, and I'm closing with this, God chose to use mankind to express his truths, to pour his truths through the language of men and through the occurrences of history. God specifically chose the people of Israel to convey his truths to the rest of the world. And so to the degree that a human can write and articulate and to pen thoughts and words and expressions and idioms and things like that, God allowed that to be, sorry, I didn't mean to hit, I guess I touched the screen there. Give me a moment, I lost my place. There we go, that was. All right, what I was saying is, to the degree that mankind has different ways of expressing himself, God allowed those expressions to be captured in the Bible as well. I don't believe, and I'm closing with this, I don't believe that when mankind penned the words of God, that when men were moved to write the Bible, I don't believe it was just what we might call automatic writing. What I mean is, it wasn't like a dictation machine where God spoke and the machine simply repeated what God said. You can do this with any basic computer or smartphone these days. You can open up a certain application like Google Translate or something like that, Google Dictation, and you can start talking into the microphone and the computer or smartphone will begin reproducing whatever you say. And the point in my example here is the computer device has no choice but to reproduce how it interprets whatever you're saying. So if you say something that's unintelligible, it will spit out maybe some gibberish, a bunch of letters that don't mean anything. But to the degree that it understands your accent and your articulation, your vocalization, it will simply reproduce whatever you're saying. That's what I mean by automatic reproduction. It's a computer. It's simply programmed to reproduce the words you say. God spoke to humans, but they are not simple computers. God simply didn't just take over their brain. I believe instead it was a little bit more complex. He spoke through their personality, through their spirit, through their character, and allowed them to pen the words, but they were still active and conscious while these things were happening. To be sure, automatic writing and all that type of stuff is really in the category of kind of voodoo and witchcraft and shamanism and spiritism and things like that. And that's not really the way that God works. So I hope you understand the difference there. So we'll continue looking at this next week. We'll pick up our quote again from this idea of Unitarianism versus Trinitarianism as it deals with the Holy Spirit. We'll look at a website at biblicalunitarianism.com. By the way, Dr. Tuggy's quote, let me just remind you again, click on 40, came from the plato.stanford.edu/entries/trinity/# HOLSPIMOD, HOLSPIMOD, Holy Spirit mode. So, but that'll do it for exploring the Shema, discussions on the issues of Trinity.